everybody, and welcome to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, Monica Moore, and I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Frummel from the Fairfax County Times. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that we are not in the studio this week. Instead, we are at Fairfax High School for the 2010 Northern Region Wrestling Championships. You'll see action from the consolation rounds going on behind us. But before we jump into everything, we want to thank the folks that help make our program possible. First of all, our good friends at CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs. Also, special thanks to Craig Sturbutzel for the fantastic photos that you see throughout this program. Don't forget that you can get copies of this program at PressBoxVideo.com and check out our website where you can see our Video Vault feature with highlights, interviews, and more. You can become a fan of the Fairfax Sports Network on our Facebook page. And of course, please do send us any comments, suggestions, or story ideas that you have. Well, Paul, obviously the big news from around the region this week is how the snow has impacted everything that's been going on. So we're going to be talking a lot about that throughout the program. But as usual, we'll start with a couple of news and notes that we want to share that have gone on over the past few weeks. First of all, congratulations to a couple of Northern Region basketball players who were nominated for the McDonald's All-American game. 4 were nominated: Shelby Romine from Westfield, Tracy King from Mount Vernon, Maisha Goodwin from Edison, and Lauren Burford from Fairfax. And then, of course, Kelsey Buchanan from Loudon Freedom High School was also nominated. Unfortunately, none of our athletes did make the final cut, but it's a huge honor to be nominated, and it really just tells you how strong basketball is in Northern Virginia. Well, speaking of wrestling, we certainly want to congratulate Andrew Embry from Marshall High School. He was named the Army Strong Wrestler of the Week, making him eligible to be Army Strong Wrestler of the Year. A couple of college signings we want to announce, both coming from Loudoun County tonight. First of all, congratulations to Alyssa Scudder from Broad Run. She has been accepted early admission to Dartmouth, where she'll play volleyball next year. Of course, she was second team All-State this year in volleyball. And also congratulations to Dominion's Alexa Rizzo. The lacrosse standout has announced that she'll be going to Navy next year. In the past 2 seasons, she scored over 90 goals, and she holds the school record at Dominion with 11 goals scored per game. Well, Paul, of course, there was some big news in Northern Virginia, and that was that they've announced that Matt Griffiths is going to be the new head coach of the Broad Run football program. We announced a couple of shows ago that that was vacant, and so they've announced that the Stonebridge offensive coordinator will be heading over to Broad Run. And I know with all the success that Broad Run's had, the fans are certainly happy to know who's going to be carrying on the torch. And of course, Griffiths has had a lot of offensive success over at Stonebridge.
Yeah, a lot of talent in that Ashburn area, and big shoes to fill, obviously, filling in for Mike Burnett.
Absolutely. They're on a 28-game winning streak, 2 state championships over at Broad Run. Well, as promised, one thing that we certainly are going to talk about tonight is how the snow has impacted all of the schools and athletic events going on. And let's start with Northern Virginia basketball, Paul, because the big news, of course, was that the announcement was made that the regular season's remaining games would be canceled and teams would head straight into their respective district tournaments.
Yeah, most teams missing their final 3 games. And as you know, in district play, you play each district opponent twice. They wiped out that second string of playing. Even if you played them twice, that second one doesn't count. You have teams like Herndon winning the Concord District, a team like Centerville getting second. Chantilly, a favorite in the Northern Region before the season started, they're in third in the Concord District as the district tournaments start today.
And of course, something a lot of the coaches have been talking about is since they didn't get that extra opportunity, there are some teams that felt like they could have changed their standing for those district tournaments. In the Liberty District, Langley was the runaway winner there, but of course Marshall and Stonebridge were battling it out for second place, and so Stonebridge doesn't get a chance to avenge that earlier season loss.
And also look at the National District, 2 great teams in Hayfield and Mount Vernon. You know, they didn't play a second time, so that could have been interesting for district seeding.
Absolutely, and you have to expect that those two teams might get to meet up in the district tournament championship, but that's been such a great rivalry that you hate that those athletes have been cheated out of the opportunity to get maybe a third opportunity or a fourth opportunity to play each other. And then, of course, in the Patriot District, South County was the runaway champion as well. People expected for them to have the number one seed. They've been so strong all season long.
Yeah, and it's something that we expected the winners of each district as we saw the districts shake out. So I don't think any team really could have a huge gripe because you know what? All things considered, compared to the other sports, they still get to play their district tournament. They still get to have that district championship to raise. A lot of sports, looking at wrestling, as you see behind us, wrestling, they didn't get to play their district tournaments.
Absolutely. And before we move on to wrestling, let's talk a little bit about what happened with the Northern Region girls basketball. Because, again, there were some teams that were a little disappointed, starting with the Concord District. Oakton will be the number one seed. Westfield didn't get a chance to have a rematch with the Cougars.
Yeah, and, they don't get a chance to get a rematch during the regular season. But if they, play well enough, they'll get a chance to play them in the finals if both teams advance to the finals. Sure, you want to play that team a second time. And then that third time, it makes it a little easier in the district tournament. But again, if they play well, they'll meet them again.
And then the other district that was a little bit up in the air was the Liberty District. Of course, Marshall getting the number one seed there, but South Lakes has been strong. They've really been coming on strong, particularly in the last few weeks.
Yeah, most definitely. A very young team and a very good team, and they're going to keep on growing. And that's where they lose. Losing 3 games, it hurts seniors, obviously, because those are, 3 games in their final season they want to play. It also hurts the young kids trying to get that experience, so it does hurt South Lakes there.
Okay, and then not much of a surprise about what happened in the Patriot District and the National District. Both of those were pretty locked up, but of course, as we've discussed, and you were just saying, that it is very unfortunate that those teams didn't get to play those final regular season games. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the Dulles District, because a lot of excitement in the Dulles District this past Monday because the girls' playoff game was held. Of course, it was Loudoun County squaring off against Freedom. Those two have been big powerhouses, and Freedom this time got the better of Loudoun County.
Yeah, exactly. And those teams have played each other so many times throughout the year, and this time it was Freedom.
Absolutely. And I would have to expect that those two teams are going to see each other again in district play later on, perhaps even in state competition.
Most definitely.
Okay, well, Paul, you alluded to wrestling, and the wrestling is going on behind us. So, of course, the athletes competing here today have been participating 2 days in the Northern Region Championships, and then this weekend they will have their state championship rounds.
Yeah, and they lose their district. They lose the district championship. And I had a story in the Fairfax Times this week about how the winter weather has affected wrestling. In most cases, teams didn't even practice for 10 days leading up to this Northern Region tournament, which started on Tuesday. Coaches got them maybe on Monday and Tuesday before the tournament started. But, and with wrestling, you have to consider the weight factor as well. Kids are staying home. They can't work out, obviously, at practice. So what are they going to do? Maybe have some junk food. And they got to make weight. It's very important in wrestling. So coaches recommended, hey, shovel snow, run wherever you can. Just focus on staying in shape, because now for this Northern Region tournament, which wraps up tonight behind us, 2 days later, the state tournament starts. So for kids that advance to that state tournament, they have a 1-day layoff before they're wrestling again. And the thing is, it's very unique to the Northern Region. The other 3 regions in the state, they didn't have to worry about that problem. They were able to wrestle their district tournaments, wrestle their region tournaments on time. So the Northern Region right now is at a disadvantage against the other regions in the state.
And speaking of being in a bit of a disadvantage, Region 2, of course, had their championships this Sunday. It was an all-day affair. They tried to combine that into a one-day event, and so the championship rounds didn't even start till around midnight. The event finished up at 2 a.m., so talk about athletes having to overcome being off for a couple of days and then having a long event like that.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, every single area in Northern Region was affected by this snow. So, a lot of coaches dealing with the same things, and that's a good thing that every team in Region 2, every team in the Northern Region, they deal with the same problems, so no team has that advantage.
Okay, well, let's move on now and talk about gymnastics, another sport that you would have to imagine the athletes not being able to get into the gym and then coming in cold and having to take part in these championships has been very difficult for them. As we speak tonight, the Northern Region Gymnastics Championship going on over at Lake Braddock High School. And then in the Dulles district, lots of gymnastics have been going on for those athletes. On Sunday, they had district championships, and then on Monday night, they had their state qualifier. So we can show you how the district championships fared with the all-around winners. So we'll show you the top 5 there. And then we can also show you the top, how the rankings broke down for the district team results. So you see their Freedom coming out the big winner amongst the teams in the Dulles district. But again, you have to feel really bad for those athletes because gymnastics is certainly a sport where you don't want to go in cold. Of course, lots of injuries can happen if you're out of practice, and so not an ideal situation at all.
Luckily for gymnastics, for those top-tier athletes, practicing for their high school is a secondary practice for them. They're able to get out to, if they were able, because of the snow, to get out to their main gyms and get their workouts in, and that helps them a little bit other than, as opposed to other sports in this area.
Okay, well, let's move on now and talk about swimming, because perhaps some of the swimming athletes also very poorly affected by what went on, particularly out in the Dulles district. But let's talk about the Northern Region athletes first. They had region championships going on Monday night, the boys championships, the boys dive championships going on, because of course the state championships are this weekend, so there wasn't a lot of time left in order to make up those events.
Yeah, they were scheduled for the Friday and Saturday before the big snowstorm hit the Northern Region swimming finals, and the girls, they got their preliminaries in on Thursday. So in the preliminaries, they can just turn them into final scores. They knew that was probably was going to happen. So the preliminaries turned into finals. So girls were done. But the boys, they were just trying to find a time. They were first thinking about doing it Friday afternoon to Friday late morning. That didn't work out, obviously, because it started snowing. So they were just trying to find a way to get it in. Luckily, they were able to get it in on Monday. So, again, that now they have to worry about the state, which is this Saturday.
And the same situation for our Dulles district teams, except for the fact that their region event was canceled. It was scheduled for Monday out in Warrenton, but the Fauquier County Schools did not have athletic events that day, and so their region event was canceled. So they're going to have to go straight into the state championships completely cold, and I know a lot of the coaches were really upset about that because their athletes not really getting very much of a postseason at all.
Yeah, when I talk to some athletic directors in the Northern Region, they're saying, this is the last case, this is the worst case scenario. Obviously, we didn't want to do this. We don't want to cancel anything, but, that's the cards they were dealt. Mother Nature, what are you going to do? So at last case scenario, you have to cancel an event, and that's obviously what happened.
Well, and Paul, I think that's a really important point to make, that the athletic directors, that Bill Curran, everyone with Fairfax, really trying to make something work here, but they weren't given any leeway at all by the state. Those state championship meets have to go on, so their hands were really tied. You have to commend them for the efforts that they were making.
Yeah, I talked with Marty Riddle, the DSA, over at Robinson, who's hosting the state wrestling tournament this weekend, and I asked him, well, the VHSL doesn't want to change the dates. Does that make your job planning the state tournament a little easier? Because this is the set date. We're not going to change. He's like, well, sure, that makes it easier, but everything else is harder, obviously, to try to fix everything around the state tournaments, because the VHSL said we're not going to change the dates of any of these tournaments. We're not going to move them up. We're not going to move them back. We're not going to do so. You have to figure out a way to get your district, get your region in at that set date, because we're not going to change. And obviously that helps out, the state wrestling tournament. Everybody's been planning for this weekend, so it's happening this weekend, but still it makes everything else harder.
And Paul, I know you talked with a lot of coaches as well who've been impacted by this. What was the sense that you were getting from them? Obviously they couldn't hold practices with their athletes, so, what was the message that they were sending their teams?
Well, the two favorite teams in this wrestling tournament behind me, Westfield and Robinson. I talked with Brian Hazard from Robinson. He's like, he's talking to his kids every single day. He hasn't seen them since the Thursday before the snowstorm. I talked to him last Friday. He hadn't seen them yet, but he's just making sure they're doing what they need to do. And he said, these kids know what they need to do. They're elite athletes, so he trusts them. with with Chuck Hoskins from Westfield, he said he has half his team, 7 kids, are experienced. They know what's happening. And then the other 7, they're kind of youngsters and not really have this experience before. So he really kept tabs on that young 7. And he said same thing. The reason they schedule these hard tournaments, they have like sometimes 10 matches in a single weekend, is to prepare themselves for this. So that's why these elite teams like a Robinson, like a Westfield, they prepare their kids for a situation like this. I also talked with Jack Clark from Woodson, one of the top teams in the Patriot District, and he said they started this season by raking leaves. They had contests, how quickly can you bag a bag of leaves, and that's how it got them in shape. So now he's like, okay, there's leaves, now there's snow. So go out, shovel the snow. They know what to do. They know how to stay in shape. He trusted them as well.
Some very creative coaches using the weather to their advantage to help their athletes stay in shape. Let's talk a little bit about our final sport that we haven't talked about, and indoor track and field. The Northern Region still having their region championships this weekend at George Mason University on Saturday, so that happening as scheduled, but with their athletes, of course, still not being able to practice, getting out, being able to run, practice their field events. So that's another event that's going to be heavily impacted by this weather.
Yeah, but luckily, 2 of the districts were able to get their district championships in. Now they're able to get the region championships in. So that's a sport that was less so able to handle the weather. But of course, indoor track could be going away next year. So it's really important to give these kids one final season, a full season of indoor track.
And of course, the other question that has to be asked is how much of a disadvantage are these athletes going to be in the state championships against athletes who've completed their regular season, had all of their postseason tournaments to date, and competing in the state championships?
Yeah, again, this is a unique situation to the Northern region and somewhat to the Northwest region, which has Northern Virginia teams. But this is a unique situation, and they are going to be at a disadvantage. But again, coaches told me there's no reason crying over it, no reason sitting down whining about it. That's the hand we're dealt, so we're just going to get after it.
Well, and perhaps athletes that do get the wins at the state championship that do really well, that just says so much about them because of what they've overcome. So certainly their ability to persevere, it's going to be a great story.
Yeah, in sports, especially like wrestling, when you get deep into a basketball tournament, mental toughness is big, and they obviously have that mental toughness to get through this whole weather situation that's been completely unique and completely unprecedented so far in our history.
Okay, and before we go, of course, have to mention the other big story from around the Northern region. That's T.C. Williams' boys basketball team having to forfeit those 12 games because they had 2 ineligible players. So that's quite a blow to a team that's enjoyed so much success over the past few years.
Yeah, it's tough. It's just a weird situation from T.C. Williams where you got 2 kids transferring in, one coming from a private school where he was reclassified as a sophomore, moved back a grade, and then when he came to TC last year, he was already in his 4th year. Then he starts this year in his 5th year. Obviously, that's not allowed, but you can't really blame the administration. You can't blame the coaches because this was coming in during a different time when Coach Ivan Thomas was leaving. There was a new DSA coming in. These kids just kind of fell through the cracks, and it was immediately found out and dealt with. But unfortunately, TC, one of the top teams, in the region, had to forfeit all of their wins.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back here at the Northern Region Wrestling Championships.